No.
We have to start over. We did the bloop, everybody. The bloop happened. The bloop happened. Yes, I will take complete ownership of that.
And you know what? My Zoom didn't record either. And
Isn't
it's
that
and it is set
interesting?
to record every single time I get on Zoom, it's supposed to record.
I think it's okay. Do you know what I think we needed? You just needed to get the feeling for it, and now you've had your test run, and now you're ready. We've got this. Okay, so Jen, I know that we've already done this once, and thank goodness we caught it on the first question because really this is amazing. And so tell me a little bit about your picky eating journey, your sensory eating journey, and kind of what brought you here.
Hmm. So I joined the picky eating and like the BLA program in August of 2023. So just under 2 years ago. And at the time, my children, I had two children, Olive, who was 4, Miles, who's 3. Um, and they were each picky in their own way.
I
At
want
the
you to
time,
are you going to describe this a little bit more later? Oh, on like
yes.
their own way. Okay, so I won't push you on that one right now because I know that that is such an important piece of this. Go ahead, keep going.
Okay, so at the time that I joined, I was really like beating myself up, telling myself that Olive's being picky was my fault.
Yeah.
And I was just so determined not to lose the ground I had already made with Miles with his relationship with food.
Can you tell me
So
a little bit about, and I know that I'm bringing you back to kind of a dark place, so I do apologize. And I meant to ask this when we did our first take, is that what were the words that were kind of going in your head that you would tell yourself when you're like, it's my fault? Like, how did that feel?
um, I picked apart like actually what happened.
Yeah.
And so Olive's relationship with food was very good for the first year of her life. But when she was just under a year old, Miles was born, and all my focus went to him. He had some extra needs. We had to release his tongue tie. I had to do extra exercises. Um, I was really focused on that, setting timers and alarms, and I was up at all hours of the night, so I would fall asleep while I was breastfeeding. And I had no energy to cook. I had no energy. And so I kept going for convenience foods. I think Olive ate um, close to like a semi-small box of Cheerios like every single week because that's what we
Yeah.
touched to back then. But I mean, even before that, thinking about like she was eating oranges and pears and lasagna and enchiladas and just all the things. And she was enjoying it, like anything and everything that we would eat or like we would go out, like we went to our favorite local restaurant and she sat and ate with us, broccoli and chicken, and she wouldn't be caught dead eating that stuff now.
No. And I mean, and that's important for people to know. I think coming in this call is that you've moved mountains, especially with both children, but it's still a work in progress. And I think that people even don't realize that we are still a work in progress in my home. Every time we bring in something new, like chicken, like chickpeas and lentils, these are not foods that I grew up on. And so we're still using the same framework and it is very successful, but go ahead, keep going. I want to hear more.
Okay, so yeah, I came into the program. Um, I started watching the videos, the course videos. I looked over the workbook, um, and I started going to coaching calls after 2 months. 2 months of reading and looking and lurking and
I like the
sulking.
word lurking. I think we have other ones in the program who do this as well,
Yeah,
but that's okay.
yeah.
And I was just saying on like when on our first take, I was like, I had no idea that it took 2 months to come to a coaching call, which actually kind of makes my wheels turn a little bit. Okay, how many others are kind of going through this? But keep on going. Okay, I want to hear more.
Okay, so I was in a really bad place mentally and emotionally.
Yeah.
And in hindsight, I was really at my lowest point as a parent.
Yeah. Yeah. And so many parents, I'm sure, are connecting to that.
Olive was losing interest in food. Like food she had previously eaten. That's when I had consulted a feeding therapist, and was declined for services because her life
And I
wasn't in danger.
I do want to go back to like this description a little bit because I think that expanding on that is I'm from Canada. I was just saying that and for us it looks a little bit different. And so I was asking you like is this the norm and what are their standards for qualifying for feeding therapy in your state or even in the US in general?
Yeah. So they look at if she's able, like if a child is able to sit and bite and chew and just feed and eat themselves, being able to eat without gagging or choking, anything that's really like life-threatening or like those are the flags they search for. And her life was not in danger, so we were declined for services.
Which I think is absolutely crazy. And I know we were just talking about it, and I was like, yeah, I'll just share. Like my mom used to like tells me stories of when I was little, and it's again like the percentiles, right? They just look at those ratios, and if you're growing, you forget that I myself, as a child of three, was she's like my mom was like, oh, what you're eating fits on the would fit on the palm of my hand in a day, and no concerns whatsoever because I was a really big picky eater as well. Okay, I want to hear more.
Okay, so I started showing up to coaching,
Mhm.
learning strategies and the science behind it. I was feeling empowered, motivated.
Would you say,
When
I
it
want to ask something here too. Do you feel like when you come into the call, you were like at that like 3 and 5, and then when you left, you're like at an 8, but then you come back because you're back at the 3 and 5? Okay, go ahead.
so yeah, when it came to like implementation, I was just so disconnected. And I would come to the next coaching call because I knew what you were going to ask me, what's going well. So I'm like searching for a glimmer of something I could say on the call or to tell you that something is going well and not just be like in a pit of despair. Um, in my head, I was thinking, I'm the problem. It's not working. I can't do this. Um, and it practically every coaching call you said, we have to track and evaluate, track and evaluate. So like the mantra in my head was there.
And it's hard because we're not innately trained for this. Like our lives are not based like a human life does not sit and reflect to the extent of what we can be doing to change our circumstances. But it's something that's actually quite possible to learn. So yeah, so tell me more about how this showed up for you.
Yeah. So at this point, I'm 4.5 months into the program and I said to myself, okay, I'm gonna write down everything Olive likes, everything that she's willing to eat. And the list was so much longer than I thought it was.
Yeah. The moment
Um,
of freedom, well, the moment of breathing space. I
yeah.
bet you that alone probably, and I mean, I can't remember. I remember like that moment, like when you said, "Oh, it's much more than what I thought." But I wonder if that moment, even knowing that it released some of your nervous system stress, if it increased uptake. I can't exactly remember, but I'm curious if we looked back, if that would be something that we would see. But anyways, keep going.
Um, just a side note that this really ties in a lot with the meal planning when we talk about that and how I handled meal planning. Um, so when I wrote everything out, I also wrote down all the like the sensory aspects. So um, what color and texture, what temperature everything was when she would eat it, so I could see how she liked the food and what the overlaps were, what was her profile basically. Um, and that really helped me determine what foods I could fade with and how I could do it. So seeing it out all out on paper made me realize that my expectations were so idealistic, so far away from where we were, that I needed to take a step back and focus on each individual food one at a time.
Yep.
And
Not the turkey dinner.
when I did that in just a few weeks, I was coming to coaching calls, and instead of feeling defeated, like I had zero progress and zero wins, I was so excited to share that Olive accepted my homemade sauce and she was accepting more of it, that she accepted a new version of quesadillas, that she's now eating rotini and penny. And pretty soon she was accepting so many new foods that I was adding things like black beans and chickpeas and carrots and cauliflower, butternut squash, pumpkin, sweet potatoes, avocado, like the list just goes on and on. And the more she accepted, the more empowered I felt,
Yeah.
especially
I know
now.
it's emotional. It is.
Yes. Yeah. Because I didn't think I was going to get there.
Yeah. No, I know. So many of us don't. Honestly, when people would talk to me about feeding therapy, not feeding therapy, but about Dante too, like as a healthcare worker who's like really busy and usually just gets, I don't want to say like frozen dinners, and you have a child that eats three foods, like even just to sit down and write a list like you did, that would have felt just so out of my reach mentally. And so, but it is what has to be done is we need to know what is working for them because it's not
Yeah.
gonna, they're not gonna fit our timeline or our expectations. We
Yeah.
have to kind of mold into theirs. And so I totally agree with this. Okay, I love it. Okay, so do you have anything else you want to add or am I moving forward
Um, So what I'll say is like, especially now, when I think of it as a food journey and not just about overcoming picky eating, but having that perspective
with?
helps me stay positive to create that positive energy, not just for my family, but now for all the parents that I'm privileged to work with in this process.
Yeah, because you do. So Jen creating this resource, and I know she's going to talk about it a little bit later. It was life changing, not just for your family, but for our family. And now you touch hundreds of families. Like it's just absolutely life changing for all of us. And yes, so I love that. And it is a food journey. It is a relationship journey, right? It's so different than what we. It's not just food. It's not just. Yeah, it's so much more. Okay, do you have anything else you'd like to add, or can I pop forward a little bit? Just because I
Yeah, we can
know
go for it.
that, yeah, just because I know time. Okay, so I actually want to talk a little bit about when you start. Oh, and you kind of brought in what you when you started in the program. How did you feel about the framework? And so actually, yeah. So how did you
Are
feel
we
about the
skipping? Are we
no,
skipping one?
no, that's cool. I know I asked you a couple questions. So there's two. This is a twofold. So you might actually lean more into the second part of the question, which is like when you started the program, how'd you feel about the framework? But then how did you feel about also the because you've been there since the beginning, and this was not the biggest part of the BLA. And it was more of a addition because I felt like people could come into the BLA and hit the ground running. So my version of creating this has expanded so much. So how do you feel about yeah, the framework as you started compared to where it changed and now what is has been added to it?
Yeah. So I love how the information is broken down the way it is because I identified Olive as the resistor in the first stage. That she wasn't just resistant, she was the investigator. Like, let me like open and like peek through, and she would take a fork and like go through the noodles and make sure there's not like a speck of basil, God forbid.
Yeah.
Um,
She's like, she was the literal inspector of every food. And like
yeah.
we see this so much now too. People fall into a couple different categories for sure, or and they're all unique, but at the same time, we do have these children who have completely like have huge distrust with food. So no, for sure. And
Yeah.
so how did that so the framework was itself like science-based and you were happy with that, but what did that look like when you were implementing? Because I know that this was not as smooth of sailing as it was, which is why we made additions to the program and it became such a powerful tool that it's a standalone now.
Um, so like remembering where I was in that and like learning the framework, and I knew Olive's a resistor, and like how am I gonna get over this hump? I was so pessimistic because I couldn't see that far forward. I convinced myself that she's going to be able to tell that now I use like cauliflower rice. And like back then I would have said, nope, she's going to know. This girl's going to know. And I would almost set myself up for failure before I began and say, she's not going to eat that or she's not going to accept that. And that would be my mantra. Um,
And how do you see this show up for other parents now? Can you almost see it within them sometimes in the program? Oh, they're just
yes,
not going to eat
I
that.
actually, so like remember like I won't call people out on coaching calls, but I'll call them out when we're one to one, and I say,
Yeah.
"Oh, I know I can finish your sentence for you."
Right? I know. And so it's and I want so that's we want everybody to feel seen on this is that Do not feel that you are alone if you feel like your child is just, you're like, they're just never going to eat it. We've all had that thought. And they've, in many ways, have all proved us wrong.
Yeah. And so, like, how truthful you are about being microscopic. It really is. And it really takes away the pressure because we're not going, like, the kids are not going to put the food under a microscope.
Mhm.
Um, and how small those changes are, and to have a clear plan of when to increase and what my maximum levels are to know what my goal is, and it's not just infinite with the fading and chaining. It really helped change what was my uh like sort of blockade to my confidence building and changing with food. I probably never could have stayed on track, had the progress, and had that progress without the support, without the coaching, without the chat, the
Mhm.
sharing pictures and video, and talking to other parents and supporting each other. I wouldn't have the progress we have now without that.
I agree. I think that those you and you can tell those who connect with and this is where the going further together really shines because that community aspect, bouncing ideas, like there is so much more with hundreds of brains that you can connect with than just one. I love it.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Tell me more. So tell me a little bit about the additions that we added and how that impacted, because I know that that had a huge impact in your journey specifically.
Um, so you mean like with the worksheets and how
I
we
mean, with
use them?
Sangita,
Oh yeah, yeah. So like um my mindset it was so heightened. I compounded anxiety, negative self-talk, like this is all my fault, telling myself all the things I should have done, but never acknowledging that I can't change the things that I did or didn't do.
or
I
things
would
you say
just,
to yourself.
yeah, I was saying, I can't, I won't, she won't, it's not working, but I was stopping myself from
Mhm.
moving forward. I instilled that fear and I couldn't get past that fear. Um, but uh yeah. And
How did
so
it feel? How did it feel to get coached on mindset compared to strategy? So I want to offer that because a lot of people think
oh
it needs to be strategy. It has to all be strategy
oh
because we're
it's
not in a strategy deficit. So you
right.
tell me what that felt like at first.
So before we added Sangita, so let's go back a little bit. I went to like even just high performance coaching with Milan, and I was going to calls and crying so hard that she stopped recording our sessions
Right?
because it
I
was
remember this.
just every I would see her every 2 weeks, and I'd go in and I'd give myself a little pep talk. I'm gonna be without tears today. It's gonna be good, it's gonna be productive. I'm going to, I'm gonna come out of this changed a little bit. And she would ask the right questions and hit on the topics, and I would think about how everything is affected. It's like full circle. And I broke, like, that's what we did. I think it was like we
Mhm.
got to week 11. So really it was almost like 22 weeks, right? Because it's every other week. And it took that long to not just break through, but like I was seeing the progress. I wasn't coming to coaching thinking I'm not seeing the progress, right? It's because it is working and we are
Right.
moving forward.
This is the person who
Um,
said she never wanted to go to any of the coaching calls too. I do remember this. You're like, I'm not sure if I'm going to show up to the coaching calls. And then within about, we'll say 6 months, you were at every coaching call almost,
yeah.
which I love.
Um, and so with that experience, I went to every single mindset call after we added Sangita to the roster, and as well as the mindful self-compassion calls with Milan before that. So what
mm,
happened was they both asked me together on a coaching call what it was that I was saying to myself that was holding me back, and I told them about the blame and the shame.
yeah.
And they gave me the tough love that I needed.
Yeah. You're almost reliving
Milan,
it right now.
yeah, yeah. Milan told me that I'm putting in the work, that Olive's trajectory will be to overcome picky eating, and that the actions I'm taking now are changing that.
Yeah.
And this is not her opinion. She's not giving me her opinion. This is what's happening. And that what's happening now is shaping her future.
Yeah. Because it's not just about picky eating. We know that.
Right.
It's so much more. And it is. It is. Jen is definitely the one who cries in your corner with you and celebrates the hardest with you in our community. And
Yeah.
I know how much it's hard to get. And that's it. We have to be vulnerable through these mindset calls in many cases because we do have those aha moments that literally almost change the trajectory of our success. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
So Sangeeta, so would you say that Sangeeta's calls are almost pivotal to the process? I think they are, and I'm like I was
Yeah.
the one leading all the calls before. And honestly, I know that the families that go to her call, literally the changes that they see within their children and themselves, um, even though we're talking about picky and sensory eating, they just go so much more past like into an entire family dynamic of change. So I think that's amazing. Okay, for
And
time's
I
sake.
think
Okay, go
she
ahead.
she asks the simplest but yet the most important questions and really makes us think about what we're saying to ourselves because remember we are our own worst critic,
Mm-hmm.
but we can also be our own best critic.
We can. We could be our biggest cheerleader, and
Mm.
I totally agree with this. And if 90% of people currently talk to themselves in a negative way, and that's a stat, that's like just like a known stat, we can imagine how many people need Sangeeta's work and Milan's work. So we know that.
Yeah.
Okay, so for time's sake, though, I'm going to go into how do picky eating, because I think this is really powerful. And this is going to bring us into the more professional part of your journey with us, because Jen is definitely a very valued team member. I couldn't even imagine this program without her, to be honest. So how do picky eating, parenting, mindset, and everything kind of connect together?
Yeah. So I'm of course going to use myself and my family as the example. So like my mindset and how I think of myself and how I think of either my kids and whatever the situation is affects my regulation, my energy. Both of my children are very in tune with me and co-regulate. If or when I become dysregulated, they're the first ones to know.
That's when you know. You actually sometimes probably don't know, and then all of a sudden you're
Yeah.
like, "What are you guys acting like?" Oh, I see. The beacon.
So the old cliche, it's not just what you say, but how you say it could not be truer when it comes to kids.
Mhm.
So when I'm calm and I'm regulated and I give one of my kids a direction, they do it. For a direction that's not an option, like such as take a bath, for example, I would not ask the question, I would be making a statement. So instead of saying, do you want to take a bath? Because we all know what the answer is going to be, right?
Mhm. Till they get in
Right.
there. But yes, it's going to be no.
Right. Right.
Then it's like, do you want to get out
A
of the bath? And
resounding
it's going to
no.
be no.
So instead, I say it's bath time. Or I
Mhm.
say, go to the bathroom and turn on the water in the bathtub. So
Mm.
to remember that questions are asked with uncertainty, while statements are said with confidence. So I still give Olive decision-making power. It's really important, where it doesn't affect the task completion. So in the bathtub example, she gets to choose which towel she uses today or which bath toy she gets to play with in the bathtub. But I transfer the same strategy to mealtime now.
Perfect. Tell me
Instead
more.
of instead of asking Olive if she wants to try new food,
Mhm.
I give her direction to touch it, ask her questions about the food, and I work on the relationship with that food.
Yeah.
So before having the mindset coaching, I was so anxious, on edge. I would go into a meal telling myself that Olive won't eat this or this isn't going to work. And what if she doesn't eat enough and she loses weight? Um, and
She was
then
the
someone
boss.
and then
She was
someone
the
thinks I'm
boss of the
neglecting
kitchen.
her.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Like my mind would spiral. Like if she loses weight, then what if like somebody thinks I'm neglecting my child?
Mhm.
I really spiraled.
Absolutely. And I know that this is a thought for so many families, and I will just share that I have a family member who just had a child and also feels like those thoughts, as soon as you have a baby and you are in responsibility for this child, I think that every mom goes through that, some version of that. So
Yeah.
I'm sure everybody's like feeling pretty seen right now. that has a pick eater.
Remember that I mentioned that Olive co-regulates. So when
Mhm.
I'm calm, she's calm. When I'm
Yes.
anxious or scared in my own head, giving me that negative self-talk, she knew. She couldn't just see it in my eyes, she could feel it in my presence. And it was so bad that I would serve a meal and then leave the room.
Yeah. I know that was hard too. That alone is hard.
Yeah. And all of that changed. I don't have to leave the room anymore.
Yeah, and you found all a bunch of really fun ways on serving food that makes it even more engaging for her to have choices. And
Yeah.
it's so fun. And now you're teaching that into the program as well. So, can you give an example of like I know that one of the things you do, you have really seen, and you don't do it every day, but like the family style, right?
Yeah.
Like I didn't even know that meals had terms. When you talked to me about family style the first time, I was like, what does that mean? And I mean, we do this sometimes. I just didn't have a term for it. And I was like, oh, that's so true. That's so fun. So
Yeah.
bringing that big things like that, describe a little bit about that.
Yeah. It gives the decision making, it puts the control into their hands. Like they want more of something, they can definitely have it. And when you don't have that expectation of I want them to eat so much of this food and so much of that food. And so actually like we made dinner one night and I took it up to my in-laws' home and I'd made my cheeseless macaroni and cheese. And we all know it's like jam-packed full of
Oh, yeah.
veggies. And Olive decided she wasn't going to eat anything else. She ate three platefuls of that macaroni and cheese, but I had no expectation of, I just knew I was bringing a food I knew she liked. But
Yeah.
I served family style and she knew she could help herself. So she would just plop more
Keep
of
on
it
going.
right onto her plate. Yes. And it
And you're
was
just
just,
like, more veggies, more veggies. Yes, yes, yes.
yes, yes.
I want to
And
offer something about that too. I think that like the fact that this is a recipe that is available in the program and there's a lot of like this misconception, but there's so many recipes that have vegetables as their base. Like if you think about vegans and plant-based families, they just naturally live this way. And so I think that the fact that we expect it to be our children are going to eat salad is not, and Olive is eating literally every vegetable that would be in a salad or more, right? Like I think that's
yeah,
amazing. That's where we have to change the way that we think a little bit.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay, we have five
yeah,
minutes. So I
yes.
want to keep us to, because this is a really important one. I know you could literally teach about this for like literally the entire call we would have had, which is how does picky eating impact all of these underlying autism symptoms that our children are suffering with, specifically also in severe and profound autism, that families don't actually think are related to picky and sensory eating. And some
Mhm.
of these fall in this kind of like area, and then you can expand on the one that you want. But potty training, meltdowns, focus, sleep, pica, poo smearing. Did you know that when I researched what was the most common pain point for that's being searched online right now on Google for families is actually poo smearing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think about how picky eating is this domino effect of symptoms. And when I see what I see as a child who's either restricting their food intake or being picky or selective about what foods they do eat, and just to like say that what we follow is the intake equation that keeps things moving, right? It's protein, fat, fiber, plus hydration. So I thought about what happens when I don't feel well. When I
Mm,
don't feel well, I don't want to eat. When I don't eat, I get constipated. When I get constipated, I can't sleep. And I can't eliminate fully, my body still needs nourishment. So it tries to tell me to eat by whatever means necessary, right? And I can't fully be present with my family. I can't focus. I can't like pay attention. And like so knowing that, think about like I started thinking about that on my kids' levels, like putting myself
yeah.
into their shoes who are only beginning to understand their internal happenings. They can't identify, express, or explain to anyone what's happening. So this shows up in as frustration, pica, self-harm, outward harm on another person, property destruction, elopement. And as a parent, I ask why. Why is my child hurting himself? Why is he scratching my arm? Why is he hitting my chest? And truth be told, that even a neurotypical child who is 3 to 5 years old doesn't have the personal insight into differentiating hunger from other types of belly aches and pains. And the disconnect between their interoception and communicating to their parent or another caregiver, it will continue to grow and escalate unless we overcome picky eating.
Yeah. It's interesting because we have a society right now, and I think I did a YouTube video with this, but it's because I watched another TED Talks, and I was like, we have over 30,000 different foods in the grocery store, and most picky eaters will eat maybe five. And so we are in a starved generation, but we have access to everything. And the focus tends to follow, unfortunately, our medical focus, where it's like, okay, well, if this is the problem, do we do just like a supplement to alleviate the symptom, or do we give them
Yeah.
anti-anxiety medication because like it looks like it's aggression and it's coming from that space? But
Yes. And it becomes reactive instead of proactive and proactively getting to the root. So we know food is the foundation. No matter how we address each behavior that happens, when we take a step back and look at the bigger picture and make those connections for our kids, the other symptoms reduce or completely eliminate.
do you feel that constant, like when, and we use this literally as a vital sign in our program, like constipation is a vital sign, is like, do
Yes.
you notice a correlation just like with, and I mean, we're not going to call out members or anything, but a correlation with both speech, with all, a lot of these, like, your domino effect as soon as that is corrected?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's why we've seen that after, because we start addressing the deficiencies and not just nutritional deficiencies, we're not even looking at vitamins and nutrients. We're only looking at that initial equation when we make the worksheet.
Mhm.
So as soon as we start addressing, like let's say there's a lack of fiber and we start inputting fiber and there they start being cleaned out, we start hearing words or
Yeah.
the attempt at making words be something is clogged and stopping them from being able to express themselves because they're
Yeah.
in that
I
fight
agree.
or flight.
We've had one member who, like, within 2 days of just starting some of our practices with a picky eater, like, they were all of a sudden sleeping 8 hours a night. Or, and then we have some members where that is, they're like, oh, like, we have like new words all of a sudden in the first week. And it's really because the constipation, when a child is not going for 5 days at a time, it is literally debilitating to every system.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like thinking about foods first, for
Mm,
me, reduce sleep struggles. I would
yeah.
see my kids moving around, tossing and turning, sometimes whining or crying at night. And when I
Yeah.
think about what happens when I don't get a full restful night of sleep, I'm more on edge, I'm more irritable, my focus is impaired. And that same thing shows up differently with kids. They'll be moody, irritable, triggered, tantrums, meltdown. So, again, addressing their meals and their food intake creates this reverse domino effect in the sense that it creates regularity with bowel movements. It helps them learn their body cues. They're more regulated. They have more restful nights of sleep. So
Oh, yeah. It's like it
there's
literally
so
dominoes the other way. It's amazing.
yeah, it's all connected in that way. So we overcome picky eating and we start to see all of those other things reduce and reduce that we don't even realize it's happening because we're so busy picking out the negative
Mm.
when we see our child tantruming and then we realize after having 4 days of like the fiber and fats and protein and being well hydrated that they're so regulated and they're going to the bathroom and all the things are good and they're getting good sleep that we are like, wait a minute,
Yeah.
everything's good. Like we're like I want more of what just happened today.
Yeah. And that's something we evaluate, right? What do we want more of?
Yeah.
What do we want less of? And how do we make that different? And so we're always moving forward in the right direction. Absolutely. Okay, Jen, I know that your daughter will be home soon, so I do want to thank you immensely. I know that we had so many technical difficulties, including recording, and that was on me. And but we will fix them eventually. And I just Jen is alone. Always, I say the value of every program we have even put together. So if you are interested in joining the Bring the Fun Back to Mealtime program, it is open for enrollment right now. She would love to welcome you in. I know this. The work that we do is so humbling, but also so gratifying to see these children get to the greater outcomes that they are. And we talk about it on our team meetings sometimes. Imagine like 3 years ago where we are today. And I couldn't imagine a better team to work with. So thank you very much. Do you want to
Yes,
end on
thank you.
anything?
I'm just very humbled to be able to work with and like share with the families who come into the program now that it feels like, almost God willing that I found the program, that I'm a part of it, and that not just as a parent, but now I get to help other families have that progress.
Oh yeah,
And
I do want to say something, and you can finish there. Is that what Jen has created? All of those resources that she talks about evaluating sensory profiling. These resources are now available to families in the program and have completely changed the game. They've literally become like an entire call in itself that we teach families how to do this so that they can grow. Okay, sorry, and I just wanted to tell that because I think that the resources that you've created are absolutely life changing. But I will let you finish because I know we're already at 12:05. And yes, thank you very much. Go ahead and say goodbye to everyone.
all right, thank you so much for having me. And I hope to see everybody who's seeing this recording to come into the program and let's work together.